we've got a very full agenda actually, and apologies first, Anwen. Apologies from the following: Councillor Elfed Roberts and Councillor Wyn Jones. All right, anybody else? Ivor Glyn has said that he will be joining us, but I can't see him anywhere. All right, can we contact Ivor Glyn? I've sent him the invite. Maybe he'll be coming later on. We'll make a start then. So apologies, we've had those. Then I only have one statement. I'm sure we're all happy to see Ivor recovering after his recent operation, and we hope he'll be fully better soon. Declarations of interest, anybody? Myself, Chair, under item 6.1. All right, anybody else? Yes, item 6 for me as well. With the cemeteries, anybody else? If not, we'll move on then to the third item, which is the minutes. Will anyone propose that these are correct? I'll propose, Mr. Chair. And a seconder? Well, thank you. Any matters arising? I have nothing. The officers have nothing, so we'll move on.
Sorry, I've got something. Yeah, on the item 3 about making the recordings available on the authority website, I couldn't see it there. So it may be there, but difficult to find. I just wonder if we had a date by which the meetings will be available on the website. Obviously quite important in terms of people seeing what's happening. Thank you.
Iawn, diolch Neil. Ydy'r rhywun o'r IT ateb hwnna?
Thank you, Neil. Can anybody answer that? I can come in there, Elwyn. A recording of the committee is made, and the recording from the last committee was put up pretty quickly. I think it was 3 or 4 days, I believe. It went up pretty quickly anyway. I must admit, I'm not sure exactly where on the website that recording is, but it is put up pretty quickly. I will make sure that it's put in a prominent place unless it's there already. All right, thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll move on. So, planning, Nant Cwmbran, Nazareth. Is it? No, sorry, I've missed one thing. Is there a site visit? Yes. The site visit report, unfortunately, has been left out of the agenda. I did email this to everybody. You should have received this last week. I thought that I would report on the panel visit first, and then move on to the application, and then you can discuss this together, if that sounds okay. That's okay with me, all right with everybody else? So we have had the report and pictures too. Yes, that's correct. All right, I'll proceed then. So the panel visits. So this happened back in March. I'll go through these detailed in my presentation now. The site was looked at. We looked at the officers' planning, and we saw that the house can be seen from the north and the south, but not from the A470. The conclusion was for panel members to discuss this further in the next planning meeting. And I'll move on to the presentation.
Iawn, ydych chi'n gweld y cyflwyniad?
Can you see the presentation? I did this application back in March, but there have been some changes. Some additional information has come in, so it's better to do it again. And also we've got a new member. So this is a retrospective application to retain a 2-story side extension and to demolish a 1-floor extension at the back of the property. The site itself is located very close to the National Park border, close to Nebo, the Nebo mast. And you can see where the red arrow points. This is the building. So this is a picture taken about 8 years ago, from the back and from the front. This is a plan of the 2-floor extension permitted in 2012, and this was subject to original policies. In February 2019, the enforcement officer visited the site. During the visit, building work was noted to build an extension which was much bigger than the original planning application allowed for. A big conservatory had also been added to the front of the house without planning permission, and you can see that clearly in this photo. This has already had a legality certificate, as it's been completed since 4 years. And this is another 2 photos showing the extension being built from the east elevation and also from the north. Because officers have significant concerns about the building, the owner was advised strongly not to progress. However, he progressed, and by now it's completed. I have some photos now of the house and the extension added. There are some additional changes as well, and I'll talk about this now, but there are more stones and less glass. This is the view from the north, I believe. Yes, this is the north. And this is the view from the east. So you can see the gable end here, which is much wider than the house and is also longer than the house. And I'll move on to the policies. The main relevant policy is Development Policy 15, which has 3 criteria aspects that need to be confirmed. The first one, the footprint should be smaller and the height lower than the original dwelling. As you can see, the footprint of this is outlined in red, 87 meters squared, and it's significantly more than the original house, which is highlighted in orange, which is 62 square meters. The side extension is an increase of 142%. If we take all extensions into account, there has been a 272% increase. The therapist report also talks about the internal floor area. So on this report, I've stated after measuring, we've got an internal floor area of 74 meters squared. The second criteria point is that the building must conform to the authority's design guidance on extensions, and these pictures come straight out of the guidance. The extension does not comply with the following guidance. The extension needs to be smaller than the house. The windows should all conform, and no windows to be put on the gable end. The third criteria point, it should not detract from the dwelling or the character of the surroundings in which it is located. If we look here at the report, you can see here the extension compared to the original extension agreed in 2012. If you see also the gable end, which is significantly wider than the original house. The extension is the main element of the building. The design of the extension is not in keeping with the original design of the house, and it does not keep traditional elements. These plans here, and you can see them in the agenda as well, show the propositions made since the original application. So to increase the stone to take the place of the wooden cladding, especially on the bottom floor of the gable end. If permission is granted today, we will need a condition to ensure that these stipulations are acted upon. Summary of assessment does not comply with criteria 1, 2 and 3 of Development Policy 15. It does not comply with criteria 2 of the Development Policy 1. Now, the applicant says that personal circumstances justify the extension. An application from an occupational therapist was presented the day before the last committee, and for that reason we decided to postpone till today, and we have received further information from the occupational therapist since then, and the office's extension report is in this pack. So you can see in the pack 2 reports from the occupational therapist, and we can weigh these against the development plan. Officers believe that the design is the main thing, and that the family's needs could be met with a more apt design. And the reasoning to reject this is the following. The proposed extension would be considered overdevelopment of the original dwelling and would be contrary to criteria 1 of the Development Policy 15, which states that an extension to a dwelling can only be smaller than the original design. The extension by virtue of its scale does not comply to the authority's design and is contrary to criteria 2 of Development Policy 15. The proposed extension by virtue of its scale, form and design would result in incongruous and overly dominant the original dwelling. The results would detract from the character and appearance of the original dwelling and would be contrary to criteria 2 of Development 1 and 3 of Development Policy 15. Conclusion, officers are of the opinion that the proposal does not comply with the relevant policies identified and cannot be supported, and the recommendation is to refuse permission. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we've got the speaker to come now. Yes, thank you very much for that report. So the speaker is Mr. Aaron Hughes, the chair of the Community Council. Welcome. And you've got 3 minutes, Mr. Hughes. I'll just allow Aaron Hughes to join us now. Hello, can you hear me? Do you want to unmute your microphone? If you could click on German in the interpretation, please. I've done that. All right, you're ready to go then. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the family. I'm here to question and to disagree with the recommendations of the officers. Under strain, Alan built the extension contrary to the original planning guidance. Despite this, the National Park were fully aware of the activities and they could have postponed the work at the time rather than waiting for the work to be completed. There has been a lack of proposition here from the park. Because of this, Alan put his family's needs before what was done. The extension is too big, but if we consider how small the original plan was, I would like the officers to consider this. They have a family of 7 and a grandmother who is ailing. No objection has been received from the community. We want to keep the Welsh language alive in this community too. Also, one of the highest respected architects in Wales has supported this application. This person also questions how valid and current the park's design specifications are by now. And also, an ex-planning officer for the National Park has worked on this design and supports this application. The report of the professional occupational therapist has been included as well, and they have said that Mrs. Owen's quality of life will be significantly improved by being able to move to the new extension. We also want to note that the extension is 27 square meters less than what was suggested for Mrs. Owen's needs. The planning should not be about punishing. Everything states that there has been no breach of planning guidance here. We believe that this would be a great contradiction to our family, to our community, our culture and language. Okay, thank you very much. Before we progress, I'm going to ask Geraint, did you correspond with the applicant when he built this place, contrary to policies? Yes, there was correspondence and there was very strong guidance not to progress initially, and once again in November, when we realised that work had progressed very quickly. All right. And also, the officer's opinion was sought as well, and they said that what was being built was not suitable. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on with the committee. Is there a proposition one way or the other? Does anyone want to speak? Alwyn. Alwyn's hand is up, then Neil. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One small thing to start off. So, bullet point 3.19 in the report, and the second line there, I think the Welsh word should be dirywio, not dirwio. Dirwio is fine, dirywio is to deteriorate, so there's a typo in the Welsh. Also, if I can say at this point that this is a very difficult application to decide upon when we discussed this back in March. It's a difficult application, but many of my concerns have been alleviated actually following the site visits, and that's mainly because of the rural location of the dwelling. This site does not interfere with everybody. You can't see the site from the main roads. There are 3 main roads actually, but the main road for me is the A487, which is the road you'd take from Pantglas to Caernarfon. Now you can't see the house from that road at all. There is another road as well, which goes from Gandal Benmaen to Nazareth. And you can see that on the map on page 18. So you'd actually need a binoculars to see the site. And you've got to specifically search for the property if you actually want to see the site. So the site can be seen from the other roads. And that's the road that goes up on the right-hand side or the eastern side of the television mast, but only for a few yards. And I walked up and down that road. I walked down the road specifically, and I was above the farmhouse before I actually realised that the farmhouse was there. And I'd actually just been there during the site visit. So it's not obtrusive. Graig Goch Mountain is opposite the Nebo Mast, and the farmhouse is in the valley between the two mountains. And I think you can see the farmhouse from the summit of Graig Goch. There is unanimous support in the community. This may be exaggerated. I'm not sure. The community council is supportive. Now, Francis Walker is one of the neighbours. Now, those of you who are not familiar with Francis Walker is one of the ex-members of this committee. She's an architect, and she's actually acknowledged as one of the most prominent environmental architects of Britain and actually in Europe. She's quite a blunt individual, and I've worked with her on many applications. And if she rejected this, you would no doubt hear about it. The only property that could be impacted by this application is Nant Cwmbran Uchaf, which is about 2 fields away from Nant Cwmbran Isaf. This is a holiday cottage, and a family from Lancashire, I believe, own that house, but they haven't visited for many, many years. Then to turn to the main considerations, the recommendation to reject the extension and its design and so forth. As far as I see, there is no reason to reject this. So it's not on the skyline, it's down in the valley, nestled into the foothills of the Graig Goch mountain. And we don't all like the same things, of course, but design at the end of the day is about taste. We always hear this, and we need to consider this. The policies of the extension, however, is a different aspect. However, this is open to interpretation too. I can accept that the policies are acceptable and are robust in urban areas, towns, villages, and even actually in rural areas where it impacts other people. But I'm not sure how relevant they are in this specific site. There is no way for this site to impact anybody. You can see it from hardly anywhere. If you look at the valley in its entirety, it's impossible to distinguish. If you look down from the mast, it's impossible to distinguish between this development and the other farmhouses in the area and in the valley. So the old square houses, and then a different sized extension next to it. The original house, as you can imagine, is not adequate for a family of 8, and that's what we're talking about here. People's lifestyles have developed. We need more room now. There are family circumstances as well. Extraordinary family circumstances to consider here, as you well know. And I don't believe that we should... I think that should be taken into consideration as we consider our policies. Now, the applicant has been rash. He has built this without planning permission. He has apologized profusely for this. And remember, we shouldn't punish him for what he's done. We should consider this application, whether the extension is in place or not. Also, I should say that we should consider every single application individually. And there are exceptions to all rules. We must remember this too. What the applicant is trying to do here, as far as I can see, Mr. Chair, is to provide a suitable home, a safe home, a comfortable home to him and to his family. And who are we at the end of the day to stand against this very worthy aim? This is how I see it. Thank you. All right, thanks, Alwyn. Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with much of what Alwyn has just said. I mean, it seems to me that one of the fundamental things here is that planning is fundamentally about people rather than buildings. And that I think there are a lot of contradictions in aspects of the planning policy. I mean, if we look at the original building, it's really hard to argue that that original building has any merit in it. It's a kind of, basically, it's quite a sad farmhouse. And a lot of the planning policies we have and guidance seem to be rooted in the 19th century, not the 21st century. People's lives have changed and what people require has changed. And I think we need to recognize that. I think the other element for me, which is really powerful, is later on in the agenda, we have a planning application for a cattle shed, which officers recommend going ahead, a big cattle shed. And I find it honestly extraordinary where we have a really powerful case here in terms of the needs of this elderly woman who clearly is living in a place which is inadequate and totally inappropriate for her. And I mean, my priorities are always around people, frankly. And I think the case made by the applicant in terms of the needs of the family, and particularly the elderly mother and the vulnerabilities that she has, I find pretty overwhelming. I wasn't able to go to the site visit with the panel, but I did go on my own. And I have to say, when I was walking around, at first I actually found it quite hard to see the place. I mean, it is fairly hidden away. It's quite hard to argue, I think, that in any way it's a form of a blot on the landscape. Clearly, the applicant should have got planning permission, clearly should have done a lot of things. But also I think that the family circumstances are really quite overwhelming. And I couldn't in good consciousness say we should reject this application because of what it means, particularly for the elderly mother. I really couldn't do that. So my view is that we should support the application. Thank you.
Iawn, diolch Neil. Tim?
Okay, thank you, Neil. Tim? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a difficult one for me. I have strong feelings for the family, a large family like this, 9, grandmother. This is a situation that I could imagine myself being in, and I really feel for the people in the situation. I have to say that the policies are here in order to protect the national park and its special qualities, and there are principles here. If we were to give permission for this significant extension, it would raise questions. I understand what people are saying regarding special reasons with regard to the grandmother being unwell, but there's plenty in the report to say that the extension is larger than is required. Also, the element of carrying on, although they had some warnings and communication from the officers. If permission was given, for me, it would give the wrong message to other people who will submit application or who might just undertake work and then ask for forgiveness afterwards. I do feel for these people, like Neil said, and the previous speaker said, you have to consider the people, because people are all important in this case, but in a national park, we have to be totally aware of the park policies and why they're in place. So those are my comments. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a lot of equally have a lot of difficulty in weighing this one, and I'm not so concerned about the question of the traditional design, because we do need to move on in terms of sensitive design and so on and so forth. My main concerns lie very similar to Tim in relation to the fact that we have some fairly clear policies for very good reasons, which have been agreed, which have been promoted, which are clearly stated. In this, and I'd also note under paragraph 3.26, where the precedents that have been shown to us with regard to the balancing of the medical issues and the other policy issues, that those apparently have been closely balanced. In this particular case, we have a very difficult personal situation, but we also have a situation where planning policies in the past were not followed in relation to the conservatory, and again, not followed in relation to this. Now, whilst we shouldn't punish, the scale of this particular development is considerably larger than the policy state, and would appear to be larger than the needs expressed. So I feel very clear in my own mind that the precedent that this might set as a signal to others in the national park that if for all sorts of personal reasons one might be able to push the boundaries well beyond the policies that are set could create many issues for the future. So I've got some real concerns about this, and I'll be interested to hear other views as well before I finally decide which way my hand will go. But I think whilst we have the policies set as they are, we have the responsibilities for the national park and the national interest in the national park. We do have to recognise that when we come to the decision on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Iawn, diolch, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I have a blue hand against an actual number. That's Edgar, apparently. Okay, Edgar, thank you.
Mae'r mic I ffwrdd yn check.
Your mic is off, Edgar. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Of course, people feel for the family, like everybody's mentioned previously and up to now. I took issue with the chair of the community council as if they were trying to pass the blame onto the authority. The authority has told them, has written to them. I've said previously that elements have been built without permission. We have to look at the policy that we have. If you don't agree with the policy, we need to change it. We need to try and change it. That's where it should be done. But as far as this application is concerned, we're not telling him to knock all of it down. He's had permission to extend the house. But like Alwyn said, he has been unwise to carry on after he had the warnings. I'm here to be persuaded if somebody wants to speak to go against the recommendation, but Freya.
Hi, Sorry, I just want to say that I agree with both Tim and Brian. What Tim said, that we have policies in place to protect the national park, and I do think it will set a precedent for future applications or for future retrospective applications. So for that reason, I'm going to agree with the officers and vote to refuse this application. That's all.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Freya.
Okay, thank you, Freya. Judith? Thank you. I'd just like to say that I agree with Neil and Alwyn. It strikes me that one of the nearest neighbours is a highly respected architect, and she doesn't object, and the community unanimously supports this. And I think we should also be aware that the context does change and has changed over the past few months in general with regard to house prices in the area. There's an increase in the sale of second homes. Getting homes for local people is becoming more challenging, and I think we should be aware and consider that reality as well. Thanks, Judith. Owain Wyn. Thanks, Chairman. I've been listening carefully to the debates. I have to say, I haven't seen it or heard anything that these special circumstances overweighs the policy. I certainly think that the fact that the officer has undertaken quite a detailed analysis in the paragraph 3.26 onwards to 3.34 shows that there are other ways that or paths that the applicants could follow. There is an option as well for them to appeal to get an inspector's opinion on this matter. Because nobody has proposed, I'm going to propose the recommendation. Okay, thank you. Does anybody second the recommendation? Edgar seconded. Ivor. Welcome, Ivor. Thank you. I also have a concern about the precedent that this was set. It's just such a small place, and it's increased so much without the need for such an increase. It causes me great concern that we write these policies that haven't been used. I don't want to open the gate to problems in the future. So all we can do is just try and regulate things. I don't know how we're going to do that, but the policies are there for a purpose and we have to stick to them, unfortunately. I do see that there is a health problem and that there is a lack of these types of houses and extensions in scale. But unfortunately, we have to say no to this. Thank you. Thank you, Ivor. I don't have any other hands at the moment wanting to speak. Does anybody else want to say anything? Neil, we're only allowed to speak once, but you can ask a question.
Can I ask a question of clarification from the Director of Planning?
Yes, that's fine. Yes, go ahead.
As I understand it, decisions that are made on any individual planning application do not set a precedent. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. If the committee decides to permit this application today, obviously it doesn't mean that we have to permit extensions which may be large again and against the policy. Every policy is dealt with on merit, and so it doesn't set a precedent. It may raise questions regarding fairness, with regarding to treating everybody consistently and fairly and the same. And obviously, for the planning system to do that is to follow the policies. We do have the right to go against policy, but we have to have clear planning reasons to go against those planning policies. And every application is considered on merit, so it's a matter for the committee to weigh things. If there are relevant planning planning considerations which would allow the committee to go against the recommendation, it doesn't set a precedent for us to have to do that with an application. No. Okay, thank you. Okay, I take it that no one else wants to speak. Therefore, we'll go to a vote. And to get this right, everybody in favor of the proposal to refuse, press the green arrow. Everybody who wants to permit, press the red cross. Is that right, Iwan? So the proposal and the recommendation is to refuse. If they agree with the recommendation, press green. If they don't agree with it, press red. It's not permission as such. We would have to go to another proposal if this proposal fails. So please vote. If you agree with the recommendation to refuse, press the green arrow.
Iwan sydd yn...
Iwan? Motion carried. So the proposal was successful. The recommendation was to refuse. Motion carried. Okay, thank you. Can we ask them how many? They're on screen in front of you. No, they're not available to everybody. But if there's a request to note the votes, we can do so, can't we, Anwen? It was 10 to 5. Okay, thank you. On to the next one. Land by Pen-y-Bryn, Penmorfa, affordable two-storey dwelling application. Who's discussing this application? John? No.
It's me, Richard here. I'm just going to share my screen to get the presentation up for you. If I can share. Right, this application, it was presented two committees ago. The recommendation then was to approve. It was asked at that time to defer to provide more information on the local need for dwellings within Penmorfa. If I remind you of the site, it's land adjacent to Pen-y-Bryn, Penmorfa. It's an outline application for a two-storey dwelling. There are no details of the dwelling other than a red line within the plot, which is shown on the screen at the moment. As you can see, it's just a red line within the plot. Just to orientate yourself, this is the road through Penmorfa, Chymadog and Porthmadog in that direction, and Caernarfon in that direction. It's a site which has been left to regenerate over a number of years, and it's fairly impenetrable. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get in on the site to take photos, and really, if the photos on site wouldn't make an awful lot of sense. It's just a dense vegetation. But the site begins here. There's a stone wall to the front of the property. Looking from the other side, the site begins here and runs just past this car here. there is a tree here which, as part of this application, was inspected by our tree officer and has been a preservation order has been put on it. So that's the site. Very little to say about the site other than it is overgrown and within the smaller settlement of Penmorfa. Looking at the policies, it is within what is described as a smaller settlement, so it can be regarded as suitable for new housing development, up to 2 dwellings. Now, last committee, as I say, it was recommended for approval, but the question was asked, is there a need within the settlement? As officers, we have re-looked at the policy implications, and the most important one really is policy 30, which is the affordable housing policy, which does stipulate that for housing to be regarded as acceptable within smaller settlements, it has to be targeted towards that settlement and be for local people or local persons who are in need of housing and wish to return to the settlement or are currently within that particular settlement. So we asked the applicant to provide more details on the housing need within Penmorfa. We did get some information from a housing association which gave very broad figures that there is a need, but it didn't actually say whether these people were from Penmorfa itself or whether they were looking specifically to relocate. It was more of a wish list rather than a targeted to specific people. We did ask the applicants then to provide a bit more information through a local needs housing survey. They weren't keen to do that. They have expressed that they are willing to sign a Section 106 local occupancy agreement, but the information just wasn't there for us to really satisfy the policy, which does say that we need to know what sort of dwelling is targeted for the settlement. So they weren't prepared to upgrade the application to a fully detailed application from the outline, so that we could then sort out a Section 106 agreement and target it for local persons. So on that basis, we've changed the recommendation to one to refuse on the basis that the application isn't fully informed for us to make those sort of decisions and to make a sensible Section 106 agreement with the discounts specified. So there we are. I mean, it's recommendation now is to refuse on the basis of lack of suitable information for this settlement and this application.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Can we see everybody back on the screen if possible?
How do I do that? Hold on.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody want to make a start, or do you want to make a proposal? Does anybody want to speak? 2 hands are up. Phil Capper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly this site is between other buildings within a village and will be appropriate for a development at some time, but in consideration of 4.2 in the document, I would like to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Thank you. Does anybody second that proposal? It's been proposed that we refuse. Seconded.
Edgar,
Edgar, are you proposing?
Neil I gychwyn. Wedyn Ifar, wedyn Alwyn.
Ifor, then Neil, wedyn then Alwyn. Ifor,
Mae Neil yn dal yma.
O'n i'n hapus i eilio'r argymell.
I was happy to second the recommendation because there is insufficient information. This is a bit of a half of a job, so I'd be happy to see this in front of us again with more information. Thank you. Neil?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a comment, I think a question for Director of Planning actually, because in the last performance report, it said that in the past year, we had a target of 25 affordable homes to give planning permission to, and we gave planning permission to 2, which clearly falls a hell of a long way short. So it's really about whether or not, when we consider this application, irrespective of its individual merit, we should also see what the position is across the whole park in terms of where we are in meeting that target. That's all.
Jonathan?
I can respond to that. Neil is right. The number of affordable housing that has been permitted during the past couple of years has been very low. Having said that, the tendency since 2011 is not far from the targets that the authority set. But the low numbers is something that we need to consider, and it is a planning consideration as well. So it's something that we should think about. We're not saying that the principle of having an affordable house here isn't possible. Of course it's possible. But the officer is just stating that it needs to be tailored to the needs of a village as required by the policy, not just an outline house for a 5-bedroom house, as noted in the application. But what's been noted, it's been noted what Neil said as well. Edgar?
Edgar? Mae'r meic I ffwrdd, di, Edgar?
Edgar, I believe your mic is off.
Edgar, ti'n clywed?
Edgar, can you hear us? Can you maybe press your unmute button? Hello, I'm here now. Yes, I have nothing against building this house, but we have to know what we're actually allowing here. And what I would say is that we should go back to the drawing board and they should come back to us with something we can actually consider. But I have a question to Jonathan as well. When was the Aberdyfi application passed with affordable housing? There was, I believe, an estate of affordable housing permitted there in 2017, I believe. All right, thanks. Or maybe it was 2018, but without checking, I'm not sure. It was about 2 years ago. All right, thank you. Brian.
Oh, yeah, hang on a minute. Where are we? Thank you, Chair. I've really got a question for Jonathan in this, because I'm a little bit confused in this particular context with the difference between outline and detailed planning and the level of information that's required. We are being suggested by the officer that we need the local need detail before we can even go to outline, or is that the sort of level of detail that we would normally expect at the detailed planning application stage? So I'm a little bit confused as to where the boundaries are on the level of information that an applicant would be required to supply for an outline, because as agreed with others, the site and the general need for affordable housing is something that we are aware of, and we seem to be asking for some very detailed here before the principle of an affordable house on this site is clear. So some clarification on that would be helpful.
Brian, Jonathan?
Iawn, diolch Brian. Mae'n
Thanks, Brian. This is a very pertinent question, and the officers have discussed this application at length. We've come to the conclusion that it was an application that needed to be weighed up. And there are two main reasons, really, why we've come to the conclusion that we have arrived at. Because this is a smaller development or a smaller settlement in the LDP, the policy states for smaller settlements that the intention of houses is to sustain these settlements and to encourage people to remain in the communities or return to them. So we'd expect some kind of specific need from the village in this example. That is a need that the applicant is aware of, but this is a speculative application. It's not actually tailored to the need of the village specifically. So this is one reason why we're slightly concerned that a speculative application has been made. We'd expect the full application where we'd expect to know how many bedrooms are in the house, who the application is for. Also, it creates a problem with forming a 106 agreement. It's much clearer with the 106 application when a full application is made, so that we can tie the application down for the applicant who's in need. It's much more difficult, if not impossible, to form a 106 legal agreement with an outline application. So that's why the officers have come to the conclusion they have in this case. All right, thanks. Did that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yes, it did. It raises some other questions of principle, I think, in relation to...
Brian, sorry, you only have the right to speak once, but...
No, that's fine. I will write to Jonathan afterwards. No, that's fine.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? If not, we'll turn to a vote. So everybody who's in favour of this recommendation, so the recommendation to reject. Sorry, can I just come, before we turn to the vote, one person has already voted. One person has a tick next to their name. Can I ask Rob to remove that tick? Okay, that's gone. All right, so we'll turn to the vote. Everybody who's in favour of rejecting this, as the recommendation states, if you tick the green button. If you reject the recommendation, then red. That's been carried. So, rejected. Okay, thanks. So, if I can ask everybody to remove their arrows now. So, next, land at Cefn Coch Isaf Cwm Strarllyn, which is erection of agricultural building, slurry store, and the creation of access for a vehicle. Who takes us through this? Richard?
That's me again, yes. Just bringing up the screen. This application refers to the erection of an agricultural building, buried slurry store, and the creation of a new vehicle access to this proposed agricultural shed. If I run through the slides, if I've got you on shared screen, this is what is proposed. It's in a fairly remote location on the way up to Cwm Strarllyn. It's on the sort of crux of a road here. This is the road which runs all the way up to the Llyn, and this is the road that runs across the country towards Penmorfa. Agricultural building here. It's on gently sloping ground, which falls, I'm pointing on the wrong screen, hold on. So the ground gently falls in this direction from the top right corner down. So there is a little bit of regrading that is required of the site. The agricultural shed is 23 metres long by 13 metres wide, approximately, and 5 metres high. Very standard sort of agricultural shed size. Entrances either end. There is a slurry store proposed in this sort of location below ground. Also in association with this, there's a new access way being created here through the what is currently a stone wall with post and wire fence above. This also shows the grading of the land. There's slight rise there, then flat, and then rising again. So there's a bit of cut and fill to go on. Also on this, there's a new line of hedging and tree planting, which isn't there at the moment, to provide screening from the road and also to provide biodiversity enhancement. Just looking through the slides now, this is from the corner plots. The shed is proposed in sort of this location with the new access points through here. As you can see, it's a very remote location. Not an awful lot of vegetation on the ground. It is grazing land. Just moving through the slides, moving across open ground. So there are quite extensive views of the site. I'll just move through the slides. There's the access point. You can see there's a low stone wall with post and wire fencing. That goes down to the road goes down to Dol Ben Mine, Dol Ben Mine. The nearest house is this one here. There isn't a great deal of view from the dwelling to the site. Looking back towards Llyn, Cwmstradllyn is in that direction on rising ground. You can see from this slide the ground does slope slightly down towards, and there's the cattle looking for a shed. There's the nearest dwelling, which is a bit further down the lane. There are some windows in this elevation, but won't be the shed won't be visible from the dwelling. A point was raised in the week by Mr. Martinson about the footpath, which is in close proximity. There is a footpath which runs, if I point out, it runs from around about this point here. It runs across the site behind these trees and then disappears behind these trees and behind the dwelling, and obviously then disappears behind these trees. Nearest point is 150 meters in this sort of area, but not visible. The nearest visible point will be around about here, which is 230 meters away. So it's in that sort of area. Let me get my highlighter pen. This sort of area. It's the view up the hill will be there's rising ground behind, so it won't be from the footpath. It won't be on the skyline, but it'll be, you know, it will be visible as an agricultural shed, but hopefully not spoiling anybody's views across the expansive landscape. I did have a look at the footpath. I couldn't see any particular use of it. It is across rough ground and does go across in that direction. I couldn't see any evidence that it's well used. There is another track here which people do use, which is an old tramway from the slate works at Cwmstradllyn down to the Dol Ben Mine area. But it's not a public right of way, but it does cross the public right of way in this sort of location here. Looking at the policies, in terms of the most important ones really are policy C, which is the spatial development. You know, it's an agricultural shed within a field, so that one is satisfied. There was some question by Natural Resources Wales on in terms of the runoff from the slurry pits. There is a triple SI within 300 metres, which is noted for its freshwater pearl mussels. After a bit of toing and froing, the NRW have been satisfied with that there are no pathways through to the triple SI, and have withdrawn any initial objection to it, and they're satisfied that there won't be any harm to the freshwater mussels. In terms of visual impacts, obviously it's a big shed. It's over 400 square meters in size, but we have had the landscaping plan and the biodiversity enhancements in terms of the landscaping across the adjacent to the road. So, and the design is a standard agricultural sheds. The colours will be specified, and materials will be specified and conditioned. So the recommendation, based on the conclusion that it's the design and size and ecological matters have been satisfied, recommendation is to approve with standard conditions on time and adherence with plans. We are asking for a construction environmental management plan, which hopefully will specify how the building is built and monitored over time. And there is an ecological survey reports, so we will specify that the mitigation is adhered to, and that the landscaping and biodiversity plan are adhered to, and the comments from the Highways Authority are enforced. Recommendation is to approve.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr Richard. Gawn ni lyniau pawb yn ôl, os gwelwch chi dda.
Right, thank you, Richard. If we can get everybody's pictures back up. Would anybody like to speak to this? Owain Wyn. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can just note that last comment that Richard made. In accordance with the report, it said that they haven't received any comments from Highways, but there was a suggestion made that he has. I think this would have been fairly key had we not received anything, because the site access is quite close to the turn, so it would be interesting to know what those conditions are. I'm also aware, because this is close to the turn towards Penmorfa, are there any stipulations regarding the size of the access or the fencing and so forth? Richard, do you want to come back there?
Yeah, I mean, with the full wording of the highways, we didn't get any comments from the Highways Authority, but we've included a condition 5, which shows that that it should be completed in full accordance with the details. As shown on the development, as shown on the plans. It is. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It is close to the road towards Penmorfa, but it's the standards that they have shown would satisfy the Highways Authority. The visibility space, I have measured them. They would satisfy the conditions that normally would be expected.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr iawn. Tim?
Okay, thank you, Tim. Mr. Chair, I just want to pick up on these issues pertaining to freshwater and mussels and so forth. I'm very pleased to see this included. It's very important that silt and things like this cannot flow down to the river during the building progress. I've got no issue with this, but I do have some concerns regarding having a slurry storage. I'm happy that NRW have said that this is satisfactory, but I do have some concerns. We've got to get this spot on, and it's important that silt is adequately managed, especially in a very sensitive location like this. But I do understand the situation with the shed itself, and I have no problem at all with that. Okay, thanks for that. I'm sure Richard will take note of what you just said. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. The issue for me was related to highways. So I'm grateful that the access point has been clarified in terms of its adequacy. But the other point related to that was whether we could have some clarification on the relation of this business to the rest of the farm and the way that it's managed, because that could well influence significantly the amount of traffic and subsequent activity that's related to the use of the building. I don't have a problem with the building in itself, but it seems to be isolated, and I was wondering what the reason for that was, and therefore, you know, its wider context, really.
Diolch, Brian. Richard, mae'n cwestiwn yma na Richard Sebna.
Richard, there's a question there. Do you want to answer this?
Yeah, I don't have firm details of how dispersed the farm is, but from personal knowledge, because the home farm isn't at this location. There is a farmhouse in close proximity called Kevin Court, but it's not in the ownership or control of the applicant. I do know they live a fair distance away from this site, and they do have a dispersed land holding. I mean, we have to deal with this application on its own merits. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Angel. It is a dispersed farm across Cwmstradllyn and down towards Penmorfa. They do have cattle up there, and this shed is to satisfy that demand at this location. I don't have a good answer for you, I'm afraid. It is a dispersed farm across this Cwmstradllyn area.
Iawn, diolch, Richard. Edgar?
All right, thank you. Edgar? If you press your unmute button, that's it, I found it. All I wanted to say was to propose that we go with the recommendation and also the conditions as they're stipulated. Okay, Edgar proposes this. Is there a seconder for Edgar? Tim has seconded. All right. The next person to speak, Ivor Lloyd. Thank you very much, Chair. This type of application is not dissimilar to what is happening on other sites in the area. You've got many sheds which are separate to the dwelling place itself. The only concern I had was water running off concrete and standing water and so forth, but I'm sure that the NRW are fairly satisfied from their reports. So my concern that it would flow down has been alleviated, so I can support this application. Neil.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a comment about the particular application, but it's about the fact that none of the supporting documents are available on the website. Because I did want to have a look at a couple just to check things, particularly the areas I don't understand very well. And so it's a question possibly to Ewing about the process in terms of whether or not we're going through the right process in terms of documents being available to be seen And also if there is a problem with the website, when it will be fixed, because these are obviously quite important documents for people to be able to verify what's going before committee, including ourselves.
Iawn, diolch Neil. Mae 'na ddau gwestiwn yn fan'na, cywirdeb.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So there are two questions there. So the accuracy, whether what's on the website is actually correct. Iwan, can you answer this? Well, I'll hand this over to Jonathan if possible, because I think he has more current knowledge than I do about the arrangements with what's put on the internet and so forth. Yes, okay, I'm happy to answer that question. Planning documents have to be available to the public. The minimum duration, or the minimum, what we have to do is to make sure that the hard copy is available for members of the public. That should be in the office. So regarding to meeting those requirements, they do meet these requirements. There is a file with hard copies available. Now, I don't know if these documents are available online. We don't have to put any information up online. So there's no necessity to do that. My understanding was that the details were all available online, but I don't think it poses any difficulty. If not, had the member raised this with us last week, maybe we could have got in touch with the IT department. I'm not sure what happened, really. I'm sorry about that, but regarding the procedure, do meet the requirements. You don't actually have to put all the details available on the National Park website. Okay, thanks. Jane.
Thank you, Chairman. Can everybody hear me? Because I haven't spoken very often in terms of the actual meeting.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that's great. Just to provide an update, we have been having issues with the website and the information that's been providing on that with the search for an application facility. We've actually put a note on that to advise anybody that's wanting specific information on applications to contact us directly, because we are aware of the problems. It's some connection with our database, and we're having issues with it. I'm under the understanding though that this should be resolved now, but if there's any further issues, I'll certainly further look at them today to make sure they have been resolved. But normally that information should be available with the sort of the formal consultation responses we get.
Iawn, diolch Jane.
All right, thank you, Jane. Would anybody else like to speak to this? I don't see anybody's hand up on the screen, so we'll turn to a vote. Everybody who's in favour of allowing this, green. Everybody who's against, the red cross. That's been carried. All right, that's been carried. Thank you. Alwyn, you're on mute at the moment. Sorry. We'll move on to the Plas Tenabwlch application then. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just get the presentation up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an application to add to the authority's nursery. Now, first of all, I want to note the report. The report mentions Mr. Rhydian Roberts and this is his home address. So That's what this address is, the applicant's home address. Now this is a current nursery in the Plastanabwch Gardens, just off the main road. As you go up from the A487 towards the Plas, so you can see the site here in red, and the road leads up to the nursery. There's a polytunnel there already. And this is an addition, so another polytunnel, similar to the size of the current one. It'll be on the adjacent land. And this tree here will be kept. Some landscaping work will be done as well on the site. And then you can see that this screen from the main road as well. This is looking up to the site and where the current palm lead tunnel is. Strategic policies A, D, and F are relevant, and also development policies 1, 2, and 6. The area is 20 meters by 8 meters, and the polytunnel measures 10 meters by 5.5 meters and is 2.8 meters high. As you can see from the pictures, the site is well screened, and this will enable the authority to grow additional plants to be used in the various projects that we have. Also, the materials proposed are acceptable. During discussions on the application, an ecologist has recommended the provision of biodiversity enhancement to be implemented. Some planting schemes will be introduced as well to replace dying ash trees and also to plant a hedge. The site is quite far away from listed buildings, and there is no effect on the historic parks or the garden, and no objections have been received either. So, conclusion: the scale and the proposal is secluded, is well screened. The scale of the development is considered in keeping with the needs. And due to the distance from the listed buildings, the site is well screened and it will not have much adverse impact on the setting. And we consider that this conforms to the relevant policies. So the recommendation is therefore to allow this with 6 conditions. To commence development within 5 years. Demolish the polytunnel if it becomes redundant, protection of Scots pine, and no storage of materials. And also to complete the planning and the landscaping aspect of the work. All right, thanks, Aled, for that. Would anybody like to propose this? Would anyone like to say anything? I propose. Okay, Tim. Who proposed? Tim? Oh, Edgar. Edgar proposes. Edgar, what do you propose? Allow? Edgar, what are you proposing? Yes, I was proposing to allow this application. There's not a huge amount of time has elapsed since the other polytunnel was built. I think what we did back then is we went around the site on an open day, and I think this is a nice addition. Is there a second? Second. All right, Tim, to speak to this. Just something small. I'm very happy to see that we grow our own plants. This is very sustainable, and hopefully this means that there will be less chance of us bringing invasive species into the national park as well. So just to support this, and I'm very supportive of what they're doing. All right, thanks. I can't see any other hands up. So we'll turn to the vote. Everybody who's in favour of the application to allow this, green. If you're against, red. And that's unanimous as far as I can see. That's been passed. We'll move on to Hafod y Llyn Woodland in Rhyd. the installation of an information panel. Who's taking us through this? Sorry, Mr. Chair. Aled?
Yeah, Mr. Cadeirydd,
Yes, Mr. Chair. So this is to install a panel. The site is by Llanmair, above Maen Twrog. And it's to benefit people who are walking around the lake. So you can see the site will go here. This is local authority land. It will be quite a simple site made out of wood, and it coincides with various policies. There are quite a few notice boards like this have been allowed in the past. So the recommendation is to allow this with these specific conditions and no advertisement, of course. All right, thank you, Aled. Would anybody like to speak to this? Any propositions? Edgar. I propose that we go with the recommendation, Chair. Thank you. Is there a seconder? I second. All right. Would anybody like to speak to this? If not, we'll turn to a vote. Everybody in favour, green. Everybody against, reds.
Motion carried. Thank you. So can you please get rid of the arrows? It's going rather well today. Land by the cemetery in Nursery, the house. Before we move on to that, the councillor John Pugh has declared an interest, and so I think he will be taken to the next room while this matter is being discussed. Owain too? Owen has declared an interest in item 6. Who's dealing with this one? John Pugh is still in the meeting at the moment. Could you take John to the waiting?
John Pugh ydy rhif 82991.
John Roberts.
John Roberts, sorry, na fo. Da ni, Mr Cadeirydd, mae John yn yr ystafell
John is now in the waiting room. Before we start on this one, there are 2 speakers. One is the applicant. There is some confusion. He thinks that he has to go to the waiting room and that he can't listen to what's going on with his own application. Can you explain that? He doesn't know what to do, really. I've discussed this with Iwan this morning. The speaker can stay until the end of the discussion on the application and then leave after that item is completed. If I can just add, it's usual when there is a speaker, there are matters that arise at a time, and the chair does have the right to ask questions of the speaker. And so if they've left the meeting, must sense that they remain. So that arrangement will continue. Yes, it will. Who's leading on this one? Thanks, Chairman. I'll just share the presentation. Can everybody see the screen? So this is an application for a new dwelling on the outskirts of Dinas Mawddwy. It's a site just outside of the village. I'll try to take you through this link. It's not working at the moment. Anyway, this is the site. The proposal is to demolish this building and build a two-story dwelling. These are photos of the site, the access and the highway. And this is the building to be demolished. And the building will be more or less on the same site as this one. It's opposite the cemetery in the village.
So
the site is outside of the development boundary shown on this plan. And this arrow shows where the site is. And because it's outside of the development boundary, it can only be considered under the development policy 11 of the LDP, which looks at affordable housing on exception sites. So this is a copy of the proposal, shows the access here, the full application and the actual dwelling, and this is a copy of development policy 11 from the LDP. In addition to the report, there are 3 letters of support have been received, and a statement has been received from the applicants last week, and I shared it with members yesterday. The main points that are raised in the statement is that the applicants say that it's a reasonable extension to the village within the 30-mile-an-hour zone. There are young people who want to stay in the area and raise a family. One of the applicants farms locally. It's a more sustainable site than being on the family farm. It's central to the farm, and that the prices of the houses is beyond the reach of local people. Because the site is outside of the development boundary, we can only consider it under policy 11, which permits affordable housing, and it's crucial that the application meets the other criterions. Officers came to the conclusion, although they are to support the principle of a single dwelling under development policy 11, no evidence has been proven to support the need for the size and the size of the dwelling is more than the SPG. Now, further information has been received by the applicants, raising the question as to whether the applicants are willing to sign a 106 agreement. And so officers are of the opinion that the proposal fails to comply with the requirements of policy 11 and SPG 4. So as an open market dwelling outside any housing development, the proposal would be contrary to both ELDP policies and national planning policy. The recommendation therefore is to refuse for the reasons stated in the report, and in addition, an additional reason in relation to the unwillingness of the applicants to sign a 106 agreement to restrict the occupancy of dwelling to affordable local needs. We do have 2 speakers. Okay, thank you. The first speaker is Geraint Morgan on behalf of the Community Council. You have 3 minutes.
Ydy Mr Morgan wedi cyrraedd ato ni?
Is Mr Morgan here?
Do, mae wedi cyrraedd, Mr Cadeirydd.
Yes, he's arrived. Can you hear?
Chi'n clywed ni, Geraint?
Geraint, can you hear us?
Ie, dwi'n yn hollol siŵr os ydi Geraint yn clywed ni.
I'm not sure if Geraint can hear us at the moment.
Sorry, mae'n deud i fod o.
Hei Geraint, ti'n yng nghlwad i? No.
Sa byddwch chi'n sortio hwnna allan, dwi'n di
Whilst you're sorting that out, I'm just going to leave for a couple of minutes. Not me, the chairman.
Drwy gael gan hyn, dwi'n newydd yr negas i Geraint.
I've just sent Geraint a message to ask him to leave the meeting and then come back in. And hopefully this will fix the problem that he's getting at the moment.
Oes 'na ddatganiad ysgrifenedig ganddo fo?
Is there a written statement? Because I think that's what should happen if we are unable to let him into the meeting. Then we could read out the statement that's been prepared. Has anybody received the written statement? Only for the applicant, not from the Community Council.
Geraint, ydych chi'n clywed ni rwan?
Geraint, can you hear us now? Right, okay, and we can hear you too. Okay, thank you.
Iawn, geith o siarad o geith?
Okay, can we ask you to speak now? You have 3 minutes to speak on this matter now. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this application. What we have simply is a young local couple who want a new home on their land. Dylan is a local farmer and these fields are a part of his farm. Ellen is from the Dyfi Valley and has been raised on a farm near Penegoes. There's nobody in the village who have opposed to this application, and there isn't any negative effect on anybody in the area. This development won't be obtrusive in the landscape because the old building is already on the site and it's a part of a built area in the village. The old cowshed is 115 meters square, and the farmhouse that Dylan and Eleanor are going to erect is 137 meters square, so a very little more or larger than what's already there. As we know, the world has changed during the past few months, and Ellen, who was an accountant, has been working from home. And so she needs plenty of room in order to be able to accommodate this. Everything is in place to erect the house with electric, water and sewerage within a stone's throw. The entrance to the road entrance is there already, and it's used regularly with the farm animals being loaded and moved there. And the entrance is within the 30-mile-an-hour zone in the village. The location, road, and the scale of the house is in keeping with the character of the area. The high price of houses and the lack of suitably sized housing for local people and local families mean that young people are moving away from the communities. It's nice to see a young Welsh couple who are keen to stay in their community. And we as a community council are 100% behind them because they are an asset to the area, and the village of Dinas Mawddwy will benefit if Dylan and Ellen can achieve their dream and erect a house among us. And hopefully see that they'll be walking their children to school within a few years, which is only about 200 yards away from the house where they want to build the house. It's our duty as community councillors, and it's a duty on you as a national park to support this application. 3 minutes is up now. Okay, thank you very much. So the applicant is the next to speak.
Croeso Dylan. Os fedrwch chi just unmutio'ch meicroffons, gwelwch yn dda?
Ie, na chi.
Felly, barod i gychwyn.
So if you're ready to start. Welcome. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our application today. This home is essential for us to be able to run the family farm. It would be used as a farmhouse as well as an office for Ellen. As an accountant, her office at home is necessary. At the moment, our application is steered towards affordable housing. Our needs don't come within the needs of this policy. This site, we know that this is outside the development boundary, and because of this, it's considered within to be open countryside. We ask you to consider this as a site that is attached to the village of Dinas Mawddwy and not open countryside. It's within the 30-mile-an-hour zone, which is in itself within a 40-mile-an-hour zone. There are lights and it's within the distance to other amenities in the village. It's in a built area and it doesn't cause any harm to the landscape in the area. We understand that affordable housing policy means that we don't have a building that is bigger than 100 meters square, which is not suitable for our needs. I would like to draw your attention that the building is 115 meters square. We are keen to build a home that is environmentally friendly. The main sewerage and water is within 10 yards, and there will be no need to set up a separate system. We want to make the best of heating and natural lighting, and we can establish a ground source heating system. We have been raised in the national park and we have enjoyed the countryside, and we really believe in conserving the countryside. We appreciate the conservation work that the park does, and this is reflected in our plan. We have tried to choose a site that has the least effect on the landscape, and the local community and the local people have said that it will improve the current landscape. It's a great place to build a home and to raise a family and to ensure our future in Dinas Mawddwy. Thank you very much for this opportunity to express our needs, and we would be very grateful if you would consider our professional needs as a local couple. Thank you. Does anybody want to speak? Owain? Two questions and comments. I have two questions. First of all, it's not clear from the description, is this an outline application or a detailed application with some reserved details, because we don't have a plan showing the floor plan, certainly of the second floor, and I think that would have helped us to understand the comments that the applicant has made in regard to the use of the two floors. Secondly, perhaps I missed it myself, but in 210 and 211, there's reference to asking the applicant to get in touch with SciTech. Either I've missed it, or will this be reported orally to the members? So perhaps we can deal with the two questions and I'll make comments afterwards. We have a response. There is a floor plan. It's not included. We do have full details about the dwelling. I don't know why it hasn't been included in the agenda. In terms of getting in touch with SciTech, I think the applicants have explained that they don't feel that they qualify for an affordable house, so they haven't gone ahead to do that. Owain? Yes, it's a pity really, because it would have helped us to be able to see the floor plan. Having said that, perhaps these two basic points regarding the location, as somebody who's dealt with several applications on nearby villages, I'm quite comfortable with this location. I know it's not exactly in the boundary, but I know that it is within what can be described as a built area of the village, and I don't have a problem with that. In principle, I do have a problem with the area for this building, but I am persuaded to a degree for the need for specific spaces for a changing room and also for office requirements of the person we're discussing. And so I won't say more than that. So I'll listen to the rest of the comments being made. Edgar?
Dinas Mawddwy.
Dinas Mawddwy. I think I know as much as anybody about Dinas Mawddwy, besides John Pugh, maybe. I'm going to go against the recommendation. I'm going to propose that we permit, and the reason for this is because we need to support people to live and work within the park. Having Welsh people, we get plenty of English people coming to live to Dinas Mawddwy, but not as many Welsh people. And I think that a couple who are going to starting out, and it'll mean that the farm continues. I really do think that we should support it. Does anybody second that proposal? Second that, Mr. Chairman, by Gethin. Okay, thank you. Tim? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do feel for this applicant. It's very difficult as a young farmer for him to find somewhere to live, and that strikes me as a really good sites for this type of development. Having said that, I am going back to what I said earlier about the other application that we discussed. The policies are there in order to conserve the special qualities of the national park, and our role is to adhere to those. But I do understand the feeling with regard to local people such as Elin and Dylan and what they want to do there. What I'd say is if we could get things to conform with policy 11 and affordable housing, and if we could get 106 agreements in place, then I would be supportive of this application. But as it stands at the moment, I do feel uncomfortable about it. But it wouldn't be a good thing for us to do this. Neil, I'm aware that John wants to come in as well at some point as well.
Thank you.
Oh, before the discussion goes any further, one thing that I should draw the committee's attention to is, if it was permitted, it would create quite a difficult principle with regard to dealing with applications in the future. Although I have a lot of sympathy with the applicants, one thing I did noted from the presentation that the applicant made was, he said that this is essential to continue to run the farm. Perhaps the applicant doesn't qualify to live in an affordable house, and this is where the complexities are started with this application. But I don't know if they've considered the rule of venture dwelling. An open market dwelling would mean a big issues. I think that we'd have a lot of inquiries in all sorts of villages if we were to permit those. But because the applicant is a farmer and this house would be essential to run the farm, I would believe possibly, and I don't know the details because obviously I don't have the details about the farm, it may possibly be worthwhile for the applicant to consider a rural venture rather than what we're discussing here, rather than an open market house. That perhaps would be a sensible direction for us to consider. If we can't decide on it today, then we would have to defer the application until the next committee at least. But that is a possible option. Thanks, John. I was going to ask that question before having discussion. What about the other possibility, that is an essential worker on the farm? Is that something that can be considered? In principle, the LDP only permits two types of housing outside of the development's boundary. It's quite a standard principle. One's affordable housing nearby the development boundary, and the other is a rural venture, and that includes essential workers. And if he's able to prove that the farm is viable and that the dwelling is essential for that, so I'd say that there's quite a strong case for that, but I'm saying that without seeing any details regarding the application. So thank you. We can see we have permitted one in Cynllwyd. That is a rural venture in Cynllwyd. Okay. Brian, did you want to speak?
Yes, sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I am a little uncomfortable to approve this under the current policy that's being looked at because of the contravention in relation to size. I understand the worker needs, and that maybe is a fault of the way that the affordable housing rules are drawn up. If we could look at this under the issue of an agricultural worker dwelling, I personally am very comfortable with the design. I think it's a very good design and it adapts to the location very well. And there are a lot of very strong things going for this, and in relation to a young couple wanting to maintain the family farm, which is a whole part of the heritage, the culture and the language and so on. So it is an application I would like to support, but under the current policy, it is very hard to go against the recommendation that has been put before us.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Alwyn.
Thank you, Alwyn. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see much of a problem here, to be honest with you. We're not talking about a manor house or a mansion. We're talking about a 3-bedroom house. I know it's slightly bigger than what we would call an affordable housing, but do you know what? This is an affordable house because the site is available for this family. You would be looking at, what, £30,000, £40,000 to buy a site like this. A building has been here already. Okay, it adds a little bit to the footprint, yes, but you only have a cemetery between here and the development boundary. I think I'm correct in saying that. So it's within 30 miles of the village. You can say it's part of the community. I see no problem whatsoever not to support this. All the community, once again, is unanimous for allowing this house. I would like if there was a local clause on this. That would answer the predicament for me. But because affordable housing is restricted by size, and for example, if you're working on the fields and you want to come in, you need somewhere to change. This is common sense, really, so I see no reason why we can't support this. All right, thanks, Judith. Yes, I agree with Alwyn and Edgar. We've mentioned previously that we are in a worrying context of a lack of housing for local people, with a huge proportion of houses being bought as second homes for extortionate prices. So this will support a local family to stay in the area. Thank you, Judith. Jonathan, do you want to come back? I'm greatly concerned about the principle of allowing this, because I know this will set a precedent in other villages. On Alwyn's point, if we accept this as an open market house, then the site is not as important. So that's just a point of clarity, really. If it's 120 or 150, it doesn't matter really if it's an affordable market house. Sarah's point was only relevant with an affordable housing application. So the size is not as important now if the committee is going to accept this as an as an open market house. But that does raise huge concerns for me as the main planner of the authority, because I know that this will set a precedent and this will crop up many times in the future. I would have to ask the planning committee to reconsider the application if you allow this today. I hope the solution for me is the issue of having a rural enterprise house or a rural initiative house. We would need time to do this, of course, but if we want to keep to the national parks policies without posing problems for the future, I think it would be better for us to bring this point up with the applicant before making a decision today. Thanks, Jonathan. So, from what I gather and understand then, in principle, that you as officers, are not against a house here. What you're against is the size and the tight egg fair housing report. The principle is acceptable. The policy allows us to develop a house which is outside the development boundary as an affordable house. Now, an affordable house has to be 106 or 105 meters squares if it's 3-bedroom, or up to 120 meters square if it's a 5-bedroom house. So out of principle, we accept the site as a site where a local affordable house can be built, but this is not an affordable house. It was when it was presented. The applicant has confirmed this, but the applicant has also confirmed that they're not eligible for an affordable house. So this is
Sorry, can I phone this while I'm just in the meeting? Is that okay?
Has that changed now? Yes, the application has changed. The application now is an application for an open market house, because if the applicant is not eligible to be in a local affordable house, then I would encourage you to look at the applicant, to allow the applicant to consider having a rural enterprise house, and this will not pose any problems in the future. It won't create a planning headache for us in the future. This is all I would ask the committee to consider today. I think this is a sensible option to allow the applicant to air things out and to explore various avenues that does actually tie into the stipulations of the planning policy. Neil.
Right. I have to say I'm slightly confused about where we are in this meeting. In relation to the application, I have to say I think it's the kind of thing we should welcome. You know, it looks like a good design. There's a clear need for it. I think we're kind of dancing around on a pinhead in relation to the size, because what strikes me as being incredibly unequitable is saying, if you cannot afford to spend the money, you have to live in a smaller house. If you can afford to spend the money, you can have a big house. That strikes me as being pretty unfair. And I realise that's a policy. Doesn't mean that I particularly agree with that policy, because it seems to me to be quite unfair. The other thing about John's comments, he does seem to be slightly contradicting himself, because earlier you were saying that decisions do not present precedents. And now you seem to be implying this one would. So I think we need a bit of clarity on that. That would be very helpful. But also fundamentally, I think we just need to find a solution. You know, as simple as that. Because actually, clearly, there's a family here who needs some form of housing. They've come up with a solution that's going to work for them as a family. And certainly seems, in terms of the village, it seems to work in the village as well. So I think it would be helpful to see what is the way through this, really, because some of this possibly should have been done in the pre-application process. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Thank you. Jonathan, do you want to get back on that point? I agree, Neil. There is some confusion here. The application has been quite confusing, actually, if I can say that. It's changed. So an application was made for an affordable house initially. Now, this is not an application for an affordable house now. And just to explain to Neil regarding the size, the reason there's a maximum size on an affordable house is this: if the house becomes too costly, then it's obviously not an affordable house, and it's very difficult to manage the price of that house as a result. So that's why we have a stipulation to manage the size of the house. It's to ensure its affordability for the future. The size by now is not possibly as important in this case, because this is not an application for an affordable house anymore. This is an application for an open market house. So I'm not too concerned about the size, because this is an application for an open market house, but I am concerned about the fact that it is an open market house. I'm sorry, Neil, if I created confusion regarding what I said previously. What I say now is hopefully reflects exactly what I said before. This does not create a precedent. Of course, we don't have to accept every single house beyond the development boundary in every single village, but like the previous application, it creates an equity issue. This committee may be supportive of this local couple, but maybe in another application, in another village, it won't be the same. But the planning policy isn't about personalities, it's about principles, and this is contradictory to policy. So there is a problem here if we reject the next application in the village, which is beyond the development boundary. That's a problem. This is a simple issue. It's about developing beyond the boundary. And that's why I'm concerned if we allow this as an open market house, this will create big problems for us now. I am very sympathetic to the applicants and what they're trying to do here. And that's why I think the solution is a rural enterprise house or a rural initiative house. We do have a policy for it. And I think we should at least consider that as an option before we come to a decision. All right, thanks. A question to Iwan. The minutes state that this was an application for an affordable house. We now hear that this is not an application for an affordable house, but an open market house. So which is it? What's before you in the papers is an application to build a house. So the application is confusing because there's been a change in what was originally stated. Originally, the applicant said that they wanted to build an affordable house. Now this has changed. It's changed because they've discovered that they're not eligible for an affordable house. So you've got to deal with the application before you today. Obviously, that confusion has been cleared up by the planning officers. This is clearly an application for an open housing house which is beyond the village boundary. John has proposed that the officers could discuss this further with the applicant to see if it's possible to make the development suitable within the planning policies. So, on what is the planning committee voting on? An affordable house or an open market house? An open market house, not an affordable house. So the proposition presented is that the application contradicts the officer's recommendation and that we allow an open market house. So, okay, the three of you with hands up have spoken before. You can only speak once. I just have a point for information. Okay, Owain. John and Iwan have suggested the path of the rural enterprise house, rural initiative house. Now, under paragraph 320, it says that the house should not be too big and a 5-bedroom, 2-story house should not be bigger than 120 square meters. So, in fairness to the officers who have to negotiate with the applicant, and in fairness to the applicant himself, I do not think that's a practical route to go down. All right, thanks. Brian, a question?
I was just going to ask a question whether we've had a proposition. Am I allowed to put a different proposition for consideration after that?
Iwan?
Os di'r...
Iwan?
Fyny, dydi?
Well, that depends. If it goes to vote and it succeeds, then that's the end of it. If it doesn't succeed, then of course it's open to the committee to come up with a further recommendation. Okay. Alwyn, a question. A question from me, Mr. Chair, regarding the size. I take it that the discussion is for an affordable house, 120 square meters or 110 square meters. Now, there's mention here, has the discussion of having a 3-bedroom house, 120 square meters, if this has not been discussed with the application, then there is a way out of this. We can postpone for a month and we can allow these issues to be solved so that we know where we stand. So within a month, we can come back, reconvene, and come to a decision which is fairer to everybody. Thanks, Alwyn. Ivor. Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm completely confused with this application. It's dressed up completely from what it was, in matching pajamas, as they say. So it's an affordable house which is also on the open market. I don't understand. But they also want to borrow money to build this house. Now, I understand with a house that's part of the farm that it's difficult to borrow money. So there's some confusion here. What I would like to see in the future is to develop what they call the principal residence policies, like they have in Cornwall, where they look after local people who want to remain in the rural areas. People who contribute to the local area and here to the language as well. So I would like to see this tweaked. I'd like to see it represented to us clearly. So I'm going to abstain this time, but I'd like to see this coming back in new attire. All right, anybody else? I don't see anybody else's hand up. So we have one proposition and one seconder that we actually allow this. Alwyn's hand is up. Mr. Chair, maybe there is room here to postpone for a month until the officers have time to solve this. Do you propose that? Yes. Okay, so there's another proposition to postpone. Okay, I'll second that.
I'll second that.
If I can come in here. So there's been a proposition now to allow this to go ahead. So to postpone is not an amendment at the moment. This has got to be given to the committee now. So the proposition is to allow this. This has got to be given to the committee now. It's been seconded. If the proposer still wants to propose this, yes, of course, if the proposer still wants to propose this. All right, so, sorry, John wants to come in. Before you progress, I just want to make one thing clear, out of fairness to everybody, to the applicants and to the committee. If the committee allows this today against the recommendation, I feel I'll have to call this in. So just regarding timing, to be completely transparent, I think it would work actually, I think it would work out quicker to thrash this out over the next few weeks and bring it back to the committee. Because if it is allowed today, I think I'll have to call it in. Okay, Edgar wants to come in here. And someone else wants to come in. 827291. Who's this person? 827291. Oh, that's Gethin. Gethin seconded the proposition. Yes, I'm willing to withdraw my support to the original proposition back. So I now support Alwyn's proposition. Okay, does Edgar want to do that? Edgar proposed this. Okay, this is a bit of a predicament for me now. There's a house there already. There's a cemetery. There's a house behind the one which you saw in the pictures. You've got two local Welsh people. They live locally. They want to live in their own community. They want to live on the farm. And I think this will make things difficult for Jonathan. And on that basis, okay, fine. But I'm very eager to see this house being built. And you're talking about this rural initiative. Can I ask Jonathan a question?
Yeah, so the
question I want to ask Jonathan is this. If we went down this road, this rural initiative road, would the house be as it is now? Would you accept the house as it is now? Well, Owain was correct. There are size restrictions on rural initiative houses. Would it be less than this? Well, we'd have to look at reducing the size of the house somewhat, but we'd have to just sit around the table and see what's the biggest house they could have under the rural initiative. That's what we'd have to do. As it is now, it looks slightly big, but I'd like the opportunity to sit around the table and discuss this with them. The rural initiative aspect has not been discussed with officers yet. It hasn't been discussed with the applicant, so we'd have to sit down and look at the advantages of that. It would be...
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it seems to me that Jonathan's suggestion for looking at the rural initiative could resolve all of these problems, and that would be the way I would be looking at this situation at the moment. That's all I've got to say, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, Edgar. Sorry. If this application comes back, it'll come back whatever the discussion was, yes? Okay, I propose to postpone for 1 month then. Iwan, there's another proposition now to postpone. Yes, so the original proposition has been withdrawn. The seconder has confirmed that he's willing for this to be withdrawn, so that proposition has fallen. So the new proposition is to postpone for 1 month or until the next planning committee. Okay, so there's still 4 hands up on the screen. Ah, they've gone now. Fine. Okay, so everybody in favour of the proposition to postpone for 1 month. Yes, but if I can come in now, there's another proposition. Now, people can speak to this proposition now. It's a new proposition. Okay, so the proposition now is to postpone. Would anyone like to speak to this amendment? If not, I don't see any hands up anyway. We'll turn to a vote. So everybody who's in favour of postponing for 1 month, the green tick, please. If you're against, the red. And that's unanimous, I believe. Postponed. Okay, that's been carried. All right. Thanks. So that's the planning applications done. Chair, we need to invite John Pugh back now. Gethin has left us, I believe. I think he needed to leave at 12 and it's now 25 to 1. And Elwyn, Councillor Anwen has also left us to go to the same meeting, I believe. All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Mae John yn ôl yn y carod on, felly mi rydyn ni gario
Diolch yn
ymlaen.
fawr. Rhybuddion gorfodaeth.
Okay. Next, we have, just for information, any questions on the first page? List of compliance cases. Second page. The third, starting with point 15, which is page 82, is it? 83? Mr. Chair, I have my hand up. Owain. Thank you, Chair. Just a comment in passing. Many of these applications go back some time. I realise that COVID has impacted on some of these things, but some of these reports suggest that things have moved quicker than anticipated. And I just want to make sure that the officers verify these before they present them to the committee, because some of them are very old. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Jane.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I actually wanted to, before we actually went through the compliance list, just sort of provide members with an update. Compliance function hasn't sort of featured with the committee since earlier in March. And so basically, I just wanted to state that obviously with the COVID-19 situation and the fact that also the compliance section has had reduced resources, that there has been little progress with the compliance process as a whole. Also at the same time is that we've been busy recruiting a new compliance planner, and that took longer to sort of come to fruition because of the fact with COVID-19, and which was all delayed. So in terms of the actual list that's in front of you today, yes, there is probably quite little change to it, but it was felt that we need to be transparent to provide members with the up-to-date situation as it is now. However, you'll notice, and I'd like to introduce Alice Tatham, who is the new compliance planner who joined us in August, beginning of August. She's actually on the screen somewhere in one of the boxes. You probably have noticed her there. Alice joined us at the beginning of August, and obviously with the fact that we've been working remotely still, we're still getting up to speed in terms of our processes and getting her up to speed with that. We're also looking in terms of actually getting the compliance function working completely remotely. During the year, obviously the compliance, we have still been doing some compliance, and Aled Lloyd has been assisting with that. But now we've got Alice in place, we're hoping that things will progress a lot quicker and we'll make some big improvements to the service. The fact that obviously we have been still progressing cases as they come in, and we're hoping that obviously that this will inevitably improve now that we've got more resources in place.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Jane.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Freya wants to speak. Welcome, Freya.
Hi, sorry, mine was number 9, the erection of a timber hut, and it says land registry search undertaken and currently making contact with the owner. I just wondered if you had contacted the owner. If it's this piece of land that I'm thinking of, it's an unregistered piece of land and someone's trying to claim an adverse possession on it. So I don't know yeah, if you have an update on that, I'd really appreciate it.
Iawn, diolch, Freya.
I'm not sure.
Thank you, Freya.
Apologies. I think Aled Lloyd would be able to provide you an update on that. He's dealing with that case.
Yeah, we did a land use search, but I don't think it's in relation to that exact piece of land, because it doesn't imply that the owner is still the person erecting the shed is the owner of that land. So I think we need to make further investigations. I've briefed ours and we've been on site, so he's aware and we should be taking up on that.
Thank you.
Iawn, diolch Aled. Brian?
All right, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I have one general observation to make and a question particularly about number 29. As far as the general observation is, I noticed that a lot of the compliance cases relate to static caravans being used for residential accommodation. I don't know how much we've looked into the reasoning behind that, whether it is to do with houses being built and people just living in them while they're building a house, or whether it is because they're a more permanent situation. If it's the latter, that suggests to me that it relates to our other housing policies and affordable housing policies that we've been discussing this morning. And maybe that's something we should be looking at in that context. The question with regard to 29 is, I see there was a report there for action to be done in 6 months, which was last June 2019, which takes us up to December 2019. There was 3 months before we were into lockdown. I'm wondering why we don't have a background on that one. And there are 1 or 2 others in that bracket where the deadline that had been set was well before we were having problems getting out to places.
Yeah, I can update you on item 20. Fedrai adrodd ar 29.
So I can speak to this point. So last week I had some confirmation from the agent that work was being done to rebuild these. So we'll be monitoring the situation to see if he completes the work. Okay, thank you. Was there anything else? I don't see anybody else's hand up. We'll move on then with the pages. We're on page 85, 86, 87, and that's that done. Then we've got the section 106 agreements. This is again for information. Any question from anybody? If not, decisions. There is, yes. Once again, the same point. There's mention with the most recent situation that some information has been received from the solicitor since February 2020. I'm not sure what the delay was. Maybe we can have the details in the next committee meeting, why these take so long. All right, fine. So this takes us now to the background papers, once again for information. Then we've got supplementary planning. Sean Roberts to present this. Yeah, so just to give you a bit of background to the supplementary planning guidance, as you know, the local development plan includes some strategic policies as a basis to decide on some planning decisions. So the supplementary planning guidance provides additional information. The original supplementary planning guidance with the Welsh language was adopted many years ago, so there have been many changes since then, data and so forth, and also the fact that we adopted a new scheme only 1 year ago. It was very timely to update this time. It was timely to update this and to support any new policies and any changes to policies. The intention of this supplementary planning guidance today is to provide detailed guidance regarding the way the planning authority will decide on applications that can influence the Welsh language. in certain communities. So because this is an update and because national policies haven't changed so much, there are therefore not huge changes to our policy. These policies pertain to data, some promotion documents and so forth. There are no huge changes to the operational aspect. So for example, the changes in the policy itself was to 2A and 2B. There have been some changes as well regarding adding reference to the Future of Wellbeing Generations Act and the strategy to have 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. There have also been some updates regarding TAN 20 with the Welsh Government and regarding signs and notifications. We're clear on this in the supplementary planning guidance that we want to ensure that all signs are at least bilingual and that we promote this. So as I mentioned as well, because there were only small tweaks to this, there have been changes to the supplementary planning guidance. And they are more cosmetic than functional. So regarding the recommendation is for members to approve the draft planning and the Welsh Planning Supplementary Planning Guidance for public consultation, which is 6 weeks. And that is subject to any modifications considered appropriate from this meeting. And I think that's it, really. If there are any questions regarding the paper? Okay, Edgar. With the Welsh language now, you've said bilingual signs. Now, is Welsh on the top and English beneath, or the Welsh on the right and English on the left? And the other question I have is with house names and farms and so forth, that people shouldn't be allowed to change the name of a house. With that last question, the Welsh government have rejected this. So we can't do anything about that. Yes, but we can include it here. We could actually draw the government's attention to this. Well, that's a point, yes. Of course, we'd have to have the Welsh government's permission to do this. So we could be on the box here. We are contravening the government. We don't want people to change names. I think that this is something that will be a wider and far more comprehensive debate. There is change in the wind, I believe, and I think we should have a partnership, the Snowdonia partnership, to agree with us on this and to drive on from there, not only with house names, but landscape topographical names. You had an email, I believe, from Ieuan Wyn. We had a survey with names on maps and so forth. This is something different, of course. So what comes first then with the signs? Well, I'm not so sure exactly. This is something that maybe John or the planning officers could answer, but ideally the Welsh language would come first or would be more prominent on the sign. All right, I can come in here on the 2 points. Regarding the first question, we would insist that signs are bilingual, but I don't think we would have the right to insist that one language is more prominent than the other, or to give precedence to the Welsh language over the English language. We have a policy as a public authority that Welsh comes above English, but with a private company, if they present something bilingually, I don't think we have the power to insist that one language goes above the other on a sign, in my opinion. Regarding place names, it's obvious that the planning policy deals with developments, so to change a name does not fall into the definition of a development. It doesn't fall into that legal definition, so we can't manage that through the planning system. So that will need to be changed in legislation down in Cardiff. Now, if you say, okay, we can put it in the guidelines, but it wouldn't mean much, actually, wouldn't actually be valid, because we do not actually have the legislative support to do this. Another thing which happens is that the English language is always in white and Welsh is in a less visible colour. This happens all the time. Can you please correct this? Welsh should be also in white. Now, maybe we don't have a legislation here, but we need people to know, people who can make the decision that things need to change. We can actually put this in, but I think there's a process to follow here regarding to put pressure on people. I don't think the way to do this is to create a supplementary planning guidance that is not valid and that doesn't tie into legislation. There are other things that we can do, and I think it would be more beneficial for us to go down that road. Okay, Alwyn. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the wording here should be that we accept Welsh signs or bilingual signs, that we should give priority here, and that bilingualism should be secondary to this. If you think about it, like you've said already, we are tied to legislation which we have no control over. So this is dabbling, actually. This is dabbling, like with TAN 20. This does not actually tackle the problem. It doesn't say this is the status of the Welsh language within the planning sphere. And it's not about being reactive, it's about promoting things. Welsh should be a factor in a decision, in planning decisions, in my opinion. And it's not, but it should be. And this is where I stand on this. And until that day comes, then we have to have some kind of change from the government or legislation. And until that day comes, it's very difficult to know what we can do. Do we just continue with this dabbling? And this is what this is at the end of the day. It's just dabbling. It's not going to make much difference. That's the truth about it. So we can put this in if we want, but of course the government could just reject it. John? Yes, thank you very much. And reading this report, I'm looking at page 108 and 109. So there are some places, Llanfihangel and Pennant, the number of Welsh speakers fell by 10%, and this was before COVID. Now we have to strengthen the Welsh language. We have to look after the Welsh speakers. The Welsh language in the national park should be more important than anything else. We are different to Brecon Beacons. We are different to every other national park in Britain, because at the moment we have a language and a culture. If we keep on as we are, we will lose our young people, our culture and our language, and to me that is more important than anything else. You know, we talk about biodiversity in Snowdonia. Biodiversity hasn't changed in 200 years, but the language and culture is deteriorating. We have to do something before we lose it, before we lose our young people and our indigenous Welsh-speaking communities. And people who have been striving for years to keep the language going. What's not clear is that the government is to blame here. It doesn't say whether young people have left their areas, and is this why the Welsh language has fallen, or is it because people have moved into the area? It's not clear here. Well, regarding these points, I presented a paper to the committee. This goes back to about 2013, 2014, regarding perceptions of the Welsh language. And there were issues here such as less young people in the area, less children, they move to look for work, more older adults moving in, we lose Welsh speakers as a result. And also, people lose language skills between two censuses as well, so people may stop using Welsh between 2001 and 2011. Then there have also been changes, if you go back to young people and older people, there have been changes to the age structure in the national park. And in that respect, things have changed. So you can't put this down as a definite reason though, but the percentage of people who have been born in England who live in the national park has increased.
I have a question that I'd like to ask. Because of the dire situation we're in and the way that the language and culture is in decline, could we have a special committee to deal with this in order to retain local people? We do have some ideas. I'd like to have a word with the chief executive. I have something in the pipeline, because otherwise we'll be like the Brecon Beacons and Pembrokeshire National Park pretty soon. Just to reiterate what we said, I think we should put more intense pressure on the Welsh Government that we want to preserve the Welsh language. The concerns are increasing with COVID, and the more pressure that's coming from different directions, all the better, really. Owain, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps I should declare an interest with this. I've undertaken a lot of language assessments and language statements on behalf of clients, and I've been working with Gwynedd and Anglesey and Cheshire. I don't think that's a prejudicial interest, and that's why I've taken part in the discussion. But I won't make comments on Appendix A and B, because I don't think they're fit for purpose any longer. I have put forward detailed comments to the officers previously. I'm aware that time is going on. I'll concentrate on three basic things, in my opinion. This is a guidance which puts meat on the bones of the policy. The policy talks about sustaining or improving the integrity of the Welsh language, and I don't think we're giving enough emphasis on increasing the number of speakers, the use of the language, and that there is infrastructure there for this to actually happen. That's one point. I think there's a precedent appearing in other areas such as biodiversity. There's consistent mention now of maintaining or improving biodiversity. I know there isn't a specific guidance from the government, but the Future Generations Act and the Million Welsh Speakers strategy means that the Welsh speakers are supposed to be improved, and that changes the policy context. Basically, I disagree with Sean. Apologise for that, and I do feel that that's changed significantly since 2012. These language assessments are supposed to happen with windfall sites, and one of the conditions of large developments is that they're supposed to undertake a process of consultation before applying, and I think we could strengthen that guidance to say that developments like this need to sustain or present the assessments as a part of the consultation process. Thirdly, I know that several members in Gwynedd and Anglesey who share my concerns. Several of these assessments are undertaken by people who possibly don't have the background or relevant skills of undertaking language assessments, and they do undermine the integrity, and I think there should be something in the guidance that requires for these assessments being made by people who do have the relevant qualifications. I totally agree with you, Owen, 100%. Over the period of 5 years, 72 language statements were undertaken by the applicants themselves, which states that their application doesn't affect the language at all, and they don't have any experience, and the government knows this, and they're encouraging it, and that's where the problem lies. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I waited a long time and was very hesitant in putting up my hand into this debate, being a non-Welsh speaker. However, I would say two things. One is I support what you're trying to do in terms of the preservation of the growth of the Welsh language and its use and the minimisation of its withdrawal. So I support all that you're trying to do in that regard. I'm not sure that I think there is a distinction between what we can achieve through the planning policy and what may need to be done as a park on a wider policy and across wider activities of the park to ensure that that is promoted alongside the culture. In relation to the current document, I have a lot of sympathy with the points that Owen made, and I have no knowledge of the detail of how it applies. But it has always appeared to be, and there may be very good reasons for it, I don't know, rather weak in what it is trying to achieve through the planning process. However, you may tell me that's as far as we can go through the planning process, in which case it suggests to me that we should, that as an authority, we should be discussing whether there are other mechanisms and ways that we should be using to strengthen the language and its use within the culture in the area. That's all I wish to say, Chair.
Diolch, Brian. Diolch am y gefnogaeth.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for the support. Does anybody else want to speak? Does anybody propose that we accept the report? I take it that everybody's in favour of accepting it. Can you accept? Well, that we accept the report, but a lot of work needs to be done again. That with regard to how we can retain Welsh people in the community and strengthen this. It's very sad to see the figures. I'll tell you what's sad as well is to look at the statistics. You're only allowed to speak once, John, sorry. Thank you for your contribution, though. I have a question, Owen. The recommendation is to approve the guidance subject to any modifications considered appropriate. We haven't heard from the officer what modifications they're willing to accept. Are they in the report? Sean?
Os ga I ddod fewn, dwi'n meddwl, cwestiwn os dwi'n dall,
If I've understood what Owen's referring to there, as a committee, you need to agree if modifications need to be made before it's sent out, following the discussion that we've had this morning. So it's up to you as a committee to decide if you want to modify anything in the guidance.
Right, Owen, chi cadw?
Owen, what do you want to modify? I've noted all of them on paper beforehand. I don't know if you want to give John permission or the authority in consultation with yourself to make those modifications. The only other choice is that a new draft of the guidance has to come back to the committee before it goes out to consultation. I'm happy with what you've just proposed, but what about the committee? To be fair, Councillor John Pugh has raised the matter that he wants to see being changed in the guidance. So I feel that there hasn't been any discussion on that. John, okay, you may speak. We have to have more strength behind the language. We need more strength behind retaining people here. We have to look at the Localism Act. It happened in England, it can happen in Devon. Can we look at it in Snowdonia National Park before we lose the language and the culture? We need to, looking at the statistics, 40% of the housing in Gwynedd are becoming second homes. I was shocked that in these rural communities, how many Airbnbs there are. People can just buy them and rent them out. It's emptying the area. We have to look at the Localism Act. We have to be much more firm with what we do. Can I just come in there, Elwyn, with a way forward? There are a couple of options, really. With all due respect, we only got the comments yesterday, and so Sean and myself hasn't, and Jane, we haven't had any chance to go through Owen's comments in detail. We've read through them, but we need a bit of time if modifications are going to be made. And the day before committee time was very tight. So we have two options. Either we go out to consultation as is in front of you today, and we'll see what sorts of comments come back, including the comments from members, and then we can have a working group before adopting the SPG, or we can make the modifications before going out to consultation and resubmit it to the next committee in October, possibly. I think we should have another committee in order to study it. Yes, we have to have this, get this right. Possibly then, and we'll discuss this again. Possibly because there are lots of comments. It's a complex field. The officers can only go so far. Possibly a discussion in a working group would be better than a committee, where we have 15 to 20 minutes at the end of a committee. Perhaps a working group would be the most sensible thing to do before going out to consultation. Everybody happy with that? Edgar wants to speak. I don't want to go on and on about it, but it is important. We're not sheep, we're not following other people. If the government wants to go away, we need to lead, and that's important, that we lead on the Welsh language. Lots of in Gwynedd Council have done so, and we have to follow up on this. I agree with Edgar 100%. I'd rather fail having tried than not trying at all. Okay, thank you. We have a meeting at 2 o'clock. There is a detailed report there on parking in Snowdon. There are loads of partnerships there that we can pursue to get their support for the park with the National Park. But that's to come again. I need to speak to the officers. So do you agree that we accept it and that it comes back with modifications? I think we should come back with something stronger. and discuss things with Owen, and we can have a working group if needed. Everybody in agreement. It's the important thing we have on the agenda. Can I have a show of hands, please? So to be clear, we're talking about come back to a working group with this. A working group, yes. This is the most important element that we have. A working group would be better. You have better time to deal with things. And more time, sorry. The only problem with a working group, I'm not sure what the timetable is to get the matter to a working group, because there are other matters that are already on the list. Could we have a special working group or a committee, special committee? Whatever we need to discuss is not as important as the Welsh language and our young people. We'll have a separate committee to discuss it. It's extremely important, and I propose that. So propose a separate committee. Can I suggest that it's therefore a working group that's separate, so that we have a full discussion? Okay. Everybody in favor of the working group, can we have a show of hands, please? For the working group, that's separate date to be set for that working group. Okay, thank you. Moving on. It's already 1:10. So the SPG. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. Can you see this in front of you? As you'll be aware, the policy section has been working on forming and revising the SPGs in line with the updates in national policy and the LDP. So I'd like to present you with the revisions to appendix number 5, guidance number 5, so that we can approve it for public consultation with any required amendments. So the purpose of this document is to note circumstances when a planning obligation would be suitable, the actual procedure, and to link it with the local and national policies. These are the ones that are discussed in the context of planning in relation to the Planning Act 1990 between the local planning authority. They can put forward that it would be in accordance with planning. As noted in paragraph 6.1 of the SPG, there isn't a set of rules that are for planning obligations, and because these developments should be on a smaller scale, the need for the planning obligations should be in line with the local development plan in relation to infrastructure and physical and social infrastructure, as well as other policies of the LDP. Development Policy 30. As you can see from the document, very few amendments have been made in relation to national policy and Planning Circular 97. I'll just run through them quickly. The first one relates to getting rid of the list of the SPGs that the authority has. These have been deleted because there's a rolling program in relation to the SPGs that wouldn't reflect the current information. Otherwise, the changes are there in order to reflect the most recent changes, so that it reads better as well. Following discussions, if there is a requirement for modifications, I'm hoping to get your approval for the next step, so that the document is the subject of public consultation with Committee, Council and the public so that I can present a more recent version to you. Okay, thank you. Any questions from anybody?
I have but one. Paragraph 7.1, page 10 of the English document, page 155 of the agenda. It says here in paragraph 7.1, individuals will be expected to enter into a planning obligation. That's the English version. Expected still leaves some room for manoeuvre. I would have preferred required.
Jyst sylw'r cyfreithiol o hynna.
Yeah. What's the comment? Yes, no problem. We can change that to required. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Brian. Owain. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies once again. I have given officers comments last minute. I apologise that it was yesterday because I was away over the weekend. Can we I'll just keep two basic points regarding strategic policy. First of all, there is no reference to strategic policy to the Welsh language as an example of social and physical infrastructure, and I have asked the question to officers if they'd be confident if we were open to a challenge. There is an example in table 6 regarding the Welsh language. The two basic points that I wanted to raise were the policy, in a way, is supposed to be there to alleviate or improve the impacts on the community and the physical infrastructure. I do feel with the Welsh language, we're moving to a period where we're looking for improvements as well as alleviation. And I do feel it would be appropriate for us to strengthen those elements of the guidance. Secondly, specifically with affordable housing, I can't see a reference to the discount that they'd expect with regard to affordable housing. When I say discount, I mean under the open market price. This causes lots of problems, especially in the context of National Park, where the average price of houses has changed significantly. Traditionally, it's been lower, but it's been very inviable to make planning for dwellings work because the prices are low, and I would appreciate some comments on that from the officers. But I am happy to wait until it's gone out to public consultation, if that's better. Does anybody else want to add to that, officer-wise? Just to respond to Owen's points with the Welsh language, like you've already said, the guidance that states that there's a planning obligation in relation to the Welsh language. Like I said previously, the purpose of this document is to outline the process in a way. So minor issues like that will be dealt with in more specific SPGs, like Sean mentioned in relation to the Welsh language. That's where the detail would be. Then with the issue of the discount, once again, the detail on that would be in SPG 4 on affordable housing, and so there isn't a set discount. If I remember correctly, what SPG 4 states is that any developer has to accept open market evaluation from 2 different agents, and then it's measured against acceptable cost guidance from the government. At the moment, we've got the one since 2018. The SPG 4, we're also looking at tiny market assessment with regards to discounts. So there isn't one set as such. The discount is different depending on the area and the prices from different agents. So yes, basically. Okay, thank you. Okay, are you going to, anybody going to propose that we accept the report? I have my hand up, Elwyn.
Right.
There are two things. SPG or Strategic Policy G. These are Tayatra. I'd like to know which one of these are ADRA homes and if they're holding the land back rather than developing on them. If ADRA are holding the land back, then it should be included here. Otherwise, it's land banking. That's one question. And affordable housing is the other one. I don't know the affordable. So if they're affordable today, say if there's a house in Llanymawddwy, one up, one down, going for 275,000, 5 people want it, and one says, puts bids in an envelope and it actually sells for 300,000. Are we comparing affordable housing for 300,000? And we're comparing it to a much more expensive prices. We have to look at it properly because it's not working at the moment. Thank you, John. Ivor?
Yeah, just isio gofyn o'n i.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, really, have you looked at how COVID factors have affected things? Materials are starting to cost a lot more to produce. That is a factor in places like Conway. They're looking at things like how the economy is going to change as well in these areas. Have you considered this in the report?
Wel, yn yr canllaw cynllunio atodol ymrwymiadau cynllunio.
In planning obligations, SPG, with regard to cost, is that what you mean? Material costs?
Sorry, dwi'n yn dall eich cwestiwn chi.
Can you repeat the question? Well, the thing is, material costs have increased since March with the COVID-19. There has been a huge increase. Some things have doubled in price, and I can't see anything in this report which takes that into consideration. Factors such as the viability tests, that's changed a lot during the past 6 months. The affordable housing SPG has been adopted last year, and so that's something more specific to that field, I believe, rather than this guidance, which is generally about obligations. I agree with Geraint, but just to add to that point, there is a paragraph in this SPG which states the authority doesn't deal a lot with planning obligations because we don't get planning applications of scale that would require for us to put those planning applications in place, but it does state if there was an element where the planning application became viable because of the planning application, then the planning application would not be used. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to speak? If not, are you willing to accept this report? Can we have a show of hands, please?
Help on John Roberts yn derbyn yr adroddiad.
Diolch yn fawr. So,
Iawn, diolch yn fawr chi.
allan ar gyfer ymgynghoriad cyhoeddus, ia?
So we'll go out to public consultation.
Aelodaeth fforwm mynediad lleol.
Okay, we'll go on to the membership of local access forums. Helen has asked me to come here today to discuss this.
Pwy sy'n mynd nesa? Elwyn ta fi?
Yr adroddiad. Cyflwyno'r adroddiad yn eisiau, ie?
Ia, fel ydych chi'n gweld, mae'r is...
As you can see here, the Authorities Subcommittee has gone through the applications about 3 weeks ago now, I believe, and we have selected, or rather the members have selected the new names, and the names are before you today. So there are 2 forums in the park, one in the north of the park and one in the south, and the new list is in the paper. Half the members have to be landowners and half have to be from the recreational sector. And 1 member is from the disabilities sector, and those comprise the membership. So you have the names before you. So what we want to do then is to accept these names. Yes, if you would, yes. Or if you have any comments. Yes, I do have a comment. Tracy. Can I just come in here? I was part of the process. So just a point of information really for the members. The majority of these applications were excellent, actually. They were very good. What was good is that we had new applications in this year too. What was slightly disappointing, however, is so few applications came in from women. So this is something that we really need to focus on. But there's a good balance here, I believe. We've got people who are new and experienced people as well. Okay, thanks, Tracy. John, yes, thank you. I was on the forum that was responsible for choosing these. I was slightly disappointed, but on the whole, yes. Maybe we can have more different types of users next time. They're all pretty much the same this time. Edgar, I accept the names in the report. All right. If you accept the green arrow, please. Thank you very much to you all. Thank you. Delegated decisions. So these are for information. So in the English, it's 194 on the PDF. Then 1 to 7. Then 8 till 15. Then go over 194, 195, 196, 7, 8, 9. Page 200 at the bottom. 201 at the bottom. 202. 203. Everybody happy with that? Applications refused now. Once again, this is for information. So page 204, 205, 206, 207, 208, and 209. Everybody happy? And then this comes to the planning appeal decisions. Kilkemais, Grange, Brinkrig. Can I just make a comment? I just want to congratulate the officers for processing so many applications in a difficult time, and I think we need to congratulate them for processing so many applications. Okay, I'm sure we all congratulate them. Thank you for that. And that's it. We're done apart from one. We have, okay, half an hour, I believe. So, lunchtime.
Well,
thank you.